You know, when you sent in your request for a deep dive on consciousness and reality, I knew we were in for a wild ride. I mean, what is reality really? And how does our consciousness, that sense of awareness we have, play into it? It's a question that's haunted philosophers and scientists for centuries. And honestly, after going through that stack of sources you've shared, I'm even more intrigued.
What's so captivating about this topic is that for a long time, we just assumed reality was something objective, external to us. But recent discoveries in neuroscience and quantum mechanics, they're challenging that very notion.
It's like we're not just passive observers of the universe, but maybe, in some way, active participants in shaping it. And that leads us to the hard problem of consciousness, which is a real head scratcher. How do all these physical processes in our brains, the firing neurons and electrical signals, create the subjective experience of awareness, of feeling joy, seeing the color red, or even just knowing that you exist?
It's a question that continues to baffle scientists and philosophers alike. But let's start with what we do know. With the dominant scientific view, that consciousness arises from the brain. Think of your brain as this incredibly complex network of billions of neurons, constantly communicating with each other through electrical and chemical signals.
So how do we go from these signals to the feeling of actually experiencing something?
That's where the search for what researchers call the neural correlates of consciousness comes in. These are specific brain regions and activity patterns that seem to be essential for conscious experience. For example, the prefrontal cortex, located right behind your forehead, plays a key role in planning, decision-making, and self-awareness.
So that's where all my deep thinking happens.
Exactly. And then there's the parietal cortex, which sits further back. On top of your head, this area is crucial for integrating information from your senses, helping you create a coherent picture of the world around you.
So, different parts of the brain are working together to create the experience of consciousness. It's like an orchestra, with each section playing its part, to create a symphony.
That's a great analogy. And to stick with the orchestra metaphor, imagine there's a conductor who helps coordinate all the different sections. That's where something called thalamocortical loops come in. These are circuits of neural activity that connect the thalamus, a structure deep within the brain, to various regions of the cortex, allowing for the rapid exchange of information.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these different pieces fit together, but how do scientists actually measure consciousness? Can they see it happening in the brain?
They're getting closer. One way is by looking for what they call neural signatures, which are specific patterns of brain activity that correlate with conscious states. For instance, when you're awake and alert, your brain waves show a particular pattern of activity called gamma oscillations, which are high-frequency brain waves associated with information processing and conscious awareness.
So if someone is in a coma, their brain waves would look different.
Exactly. And by studying these different patterns, researchers are getting a better understanding of how brain activity relates to the different levels of consciousness we experience.
That's fascinating. So, we've got these specific brain regions, these loops and patterns of activity, but how does it all come together to create the feeling of a unified me experiencing the world?
That's where a theory called the global workspace theory comes in. Imagine your brain as a giant stage. Information from your senses, memories, and emotions is constantly competing for attention on this stage, but only the information that reaches the global workspace. That becomes widely distributed and accessible across different brain regions, enters your conscious awareness.
It's like a spotlight shining on a particular actor or thought, bringing it to the forefront of our awareness.
Exactly. And this global workspace allows for the integration of different types of information, enabling us to have a coherent experience of the world and ourselves. But there's another piece to this puzzle that's even more mind-boggling. What if our consciousness isn't just a product of our brains, but is somehow intertwined with the very fabric of reality itself?
Now we're getting into some truly deep waters, but I have to admit, after reading the sources you sent, I'm really curious to explore these more out there ideas.
Well, strap in, because we're about to dive headfirst into the quantum realm, where the rules of reality get a little
Fuzzy.
bring it on. I'm ready to have my mind blown wide open.
It all starts with this concept called the observer effect. Have you ever heard of the famous double slit experiment?
Vaguely. It has something to do with light, acting like both a wave and a particle, right? Exactly. In this experiment, scientists shine light through two narrow slits. Now, if light were simply a wave, you'd expect to see a pattern of bright and dark bands on the screen behind the slits, like ripples spreading out in a pond. But here's the weird part. When they actually conducted the experiment, they found that the light was behaving like individual particles, hitting the screen in distinct points, as if they were tiny bullets.
So, light can change its behavior depending on how it's observed. That's pretty wild.
It is, and it gets even weirder. When they tried to measure which slit each particle of light was going through, the interference pattern, those bright and dark bands, disappeared. It's as if the act of observation was somehow influencing the behavior of the light.
Okay, my mind is officially starting to bend. So what does this have to do with consciousness?
Well, some physicists believe that the observer in the double-slit experiment doesn't have to be a human. It could be any system, capable of interacting with and recording information about the particles. And this has led some to speculate that consciousness itself, the act of observing and experiencing, might play a role in collapsing the wave function, making reality definite.
It's like the universe exists as a sea of possibilities until consciousness comes along and chooses a specific outcome, like picking a channel on a radio.
That's a good way to visualize it. And this is where the concept of the participatory universe comes in. It suggests that reality isn't something fixed and objective, but rather a dynamic process that involves the observer.
So it's not just that we're observing the universe, but that we're actually co-creating it through our observations.
Precisely. And this idea is further supported by different interpretations of quantum mechanics. One such interpretation is the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation, which proposes that consciousness is actually responsible for collapsing the wave function.
Okay, hold on. Does that mean that if I wasn't looking at my coffee table, it wouldn't exist?
Not necessarily. There are other interpretations, like the many worlds interpretation, which suggests that every quantum measurement actually splits the universe into multiple parallel realities, each with a different outcome.
There's a universe where I spilled my coffee this morning, and another where I didn't.
Exactly. But regardless of which interpretation you subscribe to, the key takeaway here is that the old Newtonian view of a deterministic clockwork universe is out the window. Quantum mechanics suggests that reality is far more mysterious and fluid than we ever imagined, and that consciousness might play a key role in its unfolding.
Wow, this is getting pretty deep, and we're only just scratching the surface here. I can't wait to delve deeper into these theories and explore how they connect to our own brains and experience of reality. Okay, I'm still reeling. From that deep dive into quantum mechanics, it's like the universe is this giant cosmic dance, and our consciousness is somehow part of the choreography.
Right.
But how does that play out in our everyday lives? How can we access this deeper connection with reality?
Well, many cultures have explored this connection for centuries. Through practices like meditation and contemplation, they offer a way to quiet the mind, shift our perception, and perhaps even glimpse that underlying reality we've been talking about.
I've dabbled in meditation, but honestly, I often end up thinking about groceries or my to-do list.
Yeah.
How can something so simple as focusing on your breath really alter your experience of reality?
It might seem simple on the surface, but mastering the mind is no easy feat. Think of it like training a muscle. The more you practice focusing your attention, the stronger your mind becomes, and the more you can observe.
Those habitual thought patterns that usually run the show.
So it's not about emptying your mind completely, but more about becoming aware of those mental chatterboxes.
Exactly. And as you become more aware, you create space for a different kind of perception, a more direct experience of the present moment without all the mental filters and judgments.
That makes sense. It's like hitting the pause button on the movie projector in our minds, so we can actually see the individual frames instead of getting swept away by the story.
You've got it. And what's fascinating is that neuroscientific research shows that long-term meditators actually exhibit changes in brain structure and function. For example, the prefrontal cortex, which we talked about earlier, as being crucial for executive functions and self-awareness, actually thickens in experienced meditators. Wait, so you're telling me that by sitting still and focusing on my breath, I can actually change the physical structure of my brain?
Seems that way. Studies have also shown increased activity in gray matter density in the hippocampus, a region involved in memory formation and spatial navigation. And this might explain why meditators often report improvements in memory, focus, and even a sense of expanded awareness.
That's pretty incredible. So it's not just some esoteric, mystical practice. There's actual scientific evidence to back it up. But what about other ways to shift our perception? Our sources also mention some pretty intense altered states of consciousness induced by psychedelics.
Yes, substances like psilocybin found in certain mushrooms and LSD have been used for centuries in spiritual rituals and are now being studied in controlled settings for their potential therapeutic benefits.
I've heard stories of people having profound mystical experiences on these substances, feeling a sense of interconnectedness with everything, even dissolving the boundaries of their ego. But are they safe? I mean, they are illegal in many places.
That's a crucial point, and I want to emphasize that these substances should never be taken without proper guidance and in safe legal contexts. There are risks involved, and research is still ongoing. However, preliminary findings suggest that they might be helpful in treating conditions like depression, anxiety, and addiction when used responsibly and with professional supervision.
It's like they're temporarily rewiring the brain, allowing people to see the world from a completely different perspective, maybe even shake loose some deeply ingrained patterns.
That's a good analogy. And this is where it gets really interesting. Some researchers believe that these altered states, whether induced by meditation, psychedelics, or even certain breathing techniques, might offer glimpses into a deeper level of reality beyond our everyday perception.
Okay, now we're getting back into that mind-blowing territory. Tell me more.
Imagine for a moment that our individual consciousness isn't as separate as we think it is. What if there's a kind of underlying field of consciousness, a web of interconnected awareness that links us all together?
A collective consciousness, like a giant hive mind.
It's a radical concept. And there's no definitive proof yet, but some intriguing research hints at this possibility. The Global Consciousness Project, for example, has been collecting data for years from random number generators placed around the world.
Random number generators, how does that relate to consciousness?
Well, the idea is that if there's a global field of consciousness, it might be sensitive to major global events that capture our collective attention. Think of events like 9/11, natural disasters, or even large-scale celebrations. The Global Consciousness Project looks for correlations between these events and fluctuations in the random number generators, suggesting that a surge of shared emotion or attention might influence these physical systems.
That's a pretty wild idea.
Is that what you're saying?
That our collective thoughts and emotions might actually have a measurable impact on the physical world.
That's what the data seems to suggest, although it's still a highly debated topic. But it speaks to the possibility that we're all interconnected in ways we're only just beginning to understand.
So it's like we're not just individual drops in the ocean, but rather we're all part of the same vast body of water.
Exactly. And that brings us to the question of how we can use this knowledge to navigate our lives and shape the future.
I was just about to ask that. It's all well and good to explore these mind-bending concepts, but how does it all translate into practical action? How does understanding consciousness change the way we live our lives?
Well, for starters, it challenges the old paradigm of seeing ourselves as separate, isolated individuals. If we're all interconnected, even at a subtle level, then our actions, thoughts, and intentions have ripple effects far beyond ourselves.
So that it's not just about me and my little bubble of reality. What I do actually affects the whole.
Precisely. And this realization can be both empowering and humbling. It invites us to consider the ethical implications of our choices and to live with a greater sense of responsibility for the well-being of the collective.
Okay, so we've explored the depths of quantum mechanics, pondered the mysteries of consciousness, and even dipped our toes into the idea of a collective mind. It's a lot to process. But I keep coming back to this question, how do we actually integrate all of this mind-blowing information into our daily lives?
You hit on the key point. It's not just about understanding these concepts intellectually, but about embodying them, allowing them to transform the way we experience and interact with the world.
So it's less about head knowledge and more about heart wisdom.
Exactly. Think of it like this. You've been given a powerful new set of lenses through which to view reality. Now it's time to put on those lenses and see how they change your perspective.
I'm game. But where do we start? What are some practical steps we can take to shift our perception and tap into this deeper level of awareness?
Well, one powerful tool we've already touched on is meditation. It's a practice that's been around for millennia, and modern neuroscience is now confirming its profound effects on the brain and our overall well-being.
You mentioned earlier that meditation can actually change the physical structure of the brain. How does that work?
Imagine your brain as a garden. Your thoughts, emotions, and habitual patterns are like the plants that grow in that garden. Some are helpful, like vibrant flowers, and nourishing herbs. Others might be weeds, choking out the good stuff.
Okay, I can see where you're going
Yeah.
with this analogy. So meditation is like weeding the garden.
Exactly. By practicing mindfulness, focusing on the present moment without judgment, you're essentially training your attention to notice those mental weeds and gently pull them out. This creates space for new, more positive patterns to emerge.
Instead of getting caught up in worries about the future or regrets about the past, I can choose to focus on the sensations of my breath, the sounds around me, the feeling of my feet on the ground.
You got it. And with consistent practice, these new neural pathways become stronger, and the beneficial changes in your
Yes.
brain structure become more pronounced. You're literally rewiring your brain for greater peace, clarity, and resilience.
That's pretty incredible. But meditation isn't the only way to cultivate this awareness, is it?
Absolutely not. There are many paths to this deeper understanding. For some people, it might be through spending time in nature, connecting with the awe-inspiring beauty and interconnectedness of the natural world.
I've definitely experienced that sense of peace and clarity when I'm hiking in the woods or listening to the waves crashing on the shore. It's like my worries just melt away.
Exactly. For others, it might be through creative expression, like music, art, or dance. These activities allow us to tap into a flow state where we're fully present and immersed in the moment, transcending the usual boundaries of the self.
It's about finding what resonates with you, what helps you quiet the mental chatter and connect with the deeper sense of awareness.
Precisely. And the beauty of it is that the more we cultivate this awareness
Yeah.
in our own lives, the more we contribute to the collective shift in consciousness that many believe is underway.
Wait, so you're saying that my personal efforts to meditate or connect with nature actually contribute to a larger global shift?
Imagine a network of lights, all interconnected. When one light switches on, it brightens the whole network, however slightly. Similarly, as more individuals awaken to their true nature, to their interconnectedness with all things, that ripple of awareness spreads outward, influencing the collective field
Yeah.
of consciousness.
Wow, that's a powerful image. It gives me a sense of hope and responsibility at the same time. Hope because it suggests that we're not alone in this journey of awakening, and responsibility because it reminds me that my choices, even the seemingly small ones, actually matter.
You've perfectly captured the essence of it. It's an invitation to live more consciously, to be mindful of our thoughts, words, and actions, knowing that they have a ripple effect on the world around us.
It's not just about seeking personal enlightenment, but about using that awareness to create a more compassionate and sustainable world for all beings.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our individual well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of the planet and all its inhabitants.
This has been an incredible journey of exploration. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. There's still so much to learn and discover about consciousness, reality, and our place in the grand scheme
of things.
And that's the beauty of it. The mystery is what keeps us curious, keeps us striving to expand our awareness and deepen our understanding.
Before we wrap up, I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights. You've given me a lot to think about, and I know I'll be revisiting these ideas for a long time to come.
It's been my pleasure. Remember, the journey of exploration doesn't end here. Keep questioning, keep seeking, keep expanding your awareness. And who knows what incredible discoveries you'll make along the way.
And to all of you listening out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into consciousness and reality, we hope. It sparked your curiosity, expanded your perspective, and inspired you to embrace the power of your own awareness. Until next time, keep exploring, keep wondering, and keep creating the reality you want to experience.